Walter Isaacson is CEO of the Aspen Institute, an organization focused on addressing critical issues through educational and policy studies and fostering successful values-based leadership. I want to start with that. What does values-based leadership mean?
You know, anybody can be a strong leader. The question is, how do we take the values of our society, realize that some are in conflict, that some people believe real strongly in a certain approach to, say, freedom and liberty, and the others feel more important to stress community. But you put it together and say, how can we find some common ground and solve these specific problems? Whether it's the fiscal cliff we're about to face, or how to reform education in the Delta country or Jackson, Mississippi, we know there's certain things that work. And so if we just say, let's get clear what our values are, and let's just get things going.
Does that mean that a good leader has to be a bipartisan leader?
No, but a good leader has have the humility to listen to somebody on the other side. You know, Ben Franklin, who was one of the people I've written a biography about, you know, was told, here are the virtues you need to have. And one of them that he added to the list was humility. And he admitted, he said, I was never very good at the virtue of humility, but I was very good at pretending to have humility, of feigning humility, but it was important because it made me listen to the person next to me and assume that they may have a point. And so I think you don't have to be nonpartisan, you don't have to be totally bipartisan, but you just have to realize that there are people with deeply held values on the other side. You should listen to them, and if you listen hard enough, you'll find the common ground.
And I think that's surprising to some people that leaders have to listen.
You know, the best leader is somebody, you know, you've seen them here in Mississippi and you've had great leaders, who's able to listen and to say, you know, I believe this, but I understand these people coming here from this side of the spectrum. So maybe what we could do is right here, find some common values, and let's just get done what we think we can get done.
How can the mission of the Aspen Institute be implemented in Mississippi?
I'll give you a very specific example. Bill Bynum, who is just downstairs, was a fellow of the Aspen Institute. His project was to start a financial program in Mississippi, which he's been running for the past 12 years. And I think I have the card, if you don't mind looking at it. It's called Hope Enterprise Corporation. And what it does is it helps people build up savings accounts, because sometimes when you're really poor, you actually can create a bit of a savings account, but you have to learn exactly how to do it, how to build a financial literacy, a financial base for yourself. So that's one of 1,000 programs we do, and that's based right here in Jackson, Mississippi, run by Bill Bynum, who is a fellow of the Aspen Institute.
Now, you're also chairman of the board of Teach for America. What role does Teach for America play in Mississippi?
A much bigger role, because Mississippi has been very kind to invite us to do more. The Delta country of Mississippi, Greenville, Greenwood, and those towns have for almost 20 years been part of the Teach for America Corps. People have gone down there to teach in the systems there. But more recently, Jackson, Mississippi has become part of the Teach for America Corps. So what it's doing is bringing very bright, dedicated young people who want to be teachers and have graduated from the best colleges and with some of the best grades, to say, you should help teach here where there's a need. And that helps the economy, because you're bringing people in from other places. So I think Teach for America has had an enormous impact here in Jackson and in the Delta country of Mississippi.
They also make a commitment to stay for 2 years, is it?
They stay for 2 years, that's a commitment. But one of the things we've discovered in the 21 years of Teach for America is that 68% of the people who've been members of the Teach for America Corps end up staying in education, and usually in the place where they came. I'm from New Orleans. We had about 500 Teach for America Corps members before the storm. We now have about 2,000 in New Orleans. They've just been running everything, including the state superintendent of education in Louisiana is a Teach for America Corps member graduate. So people stay in education once they get that taste of it through Teach for America.
That's a really good track record. What do you attribute that to? Because they want to be educators to begin with?
You know, no, because most of the people in Teach for America who are Corps members probably would not have gone into education if they hadn't been recruited or wanted to join Teach for America. They would have become lawyers or bankers or done many great things, but they had the opportunity to join the core of Teach for America. And once they've gotten that taste, there's just a simple belief, which is that every kid in this country deserves a decent shot. And that's what is the underlying belief of Teach for America. And once they've tasted that, they say, you know, I could do this the rest of my life and lead a meaningful life.
How does the Aspen Institute complement the work of Teach for America? Are they intertwined?
Not really, but we're very involved at the Aspen Institute in education reform, so a lot of the people who've been involved in Teach for America or core members are part of our education groups because they've had hands-on experience. I mean, I sometimes hear people telling me, here's what we should do with the school system, and here's how we should get rid of teachers or do this with teachers. And I say, have you ever actually taught in a school system? Have you ever been involved, even deeply involved in a school system in an underserved community? And they say no. And I say, well, you know, I'd rather get my advice from people who've been, for example, either teachers or core members in Teach for America. And so many of our programs are run by or have a lot of involvement by Teach for America core members.
You are one of Time Magazine's 2012 most influential people in the world. And you've written books about very influential people in this world. Henry Kissinger, Benjamin Franklin, who you mentioned, Albert Einstein, and of course Steve Jobs. That biography being the biggest selling biography in...
Trust me, it's not because I wrote it, it's because Steve Jobs is an interesting guy.
Well, I want to ask you about that. Did he give you access? I know you talked to him quite a bit. Did he give you access? Did you have to get permission from him, or did he approach you?
He approached me, but I'd known him for 20 years. I'd known him ever since the Mac came out in 1984, the original Macintosh. And so we had known each other. I think that he wanted an independent biography. He wanted somebody, you know, not an as told to book. So he gave me 45, 50 interviews. We spent a lot of time together. But he said he wanted it to be a book that I controlled. And so it was very interesting to have that much close contact with him.
Was it prior to his cancer diagnosis?
He called me in the summer of 2004, early 2004, and said, I want you to do my biography. And I had done Benjamin Franklin, was just about to publish Einstein, and my first reaction was, hey, Steve, you know, Ben Franklin, Albert Einstein, you. And I said, why don't we wait 30 years until you retire, and maybe we'll see. But then I realized that he had just been diagnosed with cancer. He had kept it secret. He didn't tell me at first. And that's when I realized, well, this is an important opportunity, and I have to do it now.
Again, Henry Kissinger, Benjamin Franklin, Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs. Who's next? Who is the next major influential character?
One of the things Steve Jobs always said is stay hungry, stay foolish. By that he meant don't get into a rut. Don't just keep doing the same thing over and over. And I know my publisher and my editors would all love it if I just did another, you know, big figure, Louis Armstrong or some creative figure. But I'm going to do a book about the history and the people who invented the computer, the internet, the microchip, the whole digital revolution we're going through. I don't think we know the names of the people who were behind the first computers. And so I'm going to do some not very well-known people and do a group biography of them.
I just want our viewers, listeners to know that you are a former managing editor of Time Magazine. You were the chairman and CEO of CNN. And again, you're one of the most influential people in 2012 in the entire world. What do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want there to be some humility. I know that I'm not really the most influential people in 2012. It was nice of my old colleagues at Time to say that. I think what was important is that I write about influential people, but I don't confuse that with being influential myself. The only influence I have is to help people learn, how do I lead a good life? Let me read about Benjamin Franklin. How do I lead a creative life? Let me read about Steve Jobs. How do I harness imagination? Let me read about Albert Einstein. And so we each try to do what we can to make other people's lives more interesting and better. I had a mentor once, Walker Percy, the great Louisiana novelist, who once said there are two types of people who come from the South, preachers and storytellers. He said, for goodness sakes, be a storyteller. The world's got a few too many preachers right now, but by telling stories, whether it's a story of Einstein, Steve Jobs, Ben Franklin, whatever it may be, you can help people understand what role they might play in life. And that might be a little contribution I'm making, which is not quite as big as Steve Jobs inventing the iPad, but maybe it inspires the next person who will invent the next iPad.
You've been in newspapers, magazines, and of course television news. Do you consider yourself a journalist?
Yeah, I do, and I think journalism is going through a rough period now, especially print journalism and newspapers. But I do believe that journalism, the telling of stories, the reporting of facts, is deeply important. Benjamin Franklin, that's what he did. He's a 17-year-old runaway. He comes to Philadelphia. What does he do? He starts a newspaper. He starts then newspapers in other cities and even a postal service to help deliver the newspapers. Why? Because the free flow of information empowers people, bends the arc of history towards democracy, and allows us to have great economies.
Albert Einstein, was he eccentric, a character? Are geniuses eccentric, I guess is what
Well, geniuses are different than me and you. And Einstein was a rebel. He just thought differently. But you know, the really weird thing he did is he asked questions about things you and I would consider obvious. Like when when Einstein's 6 or 7 years old, his dad gives him a compass. And Einstein, day after day, year after year, says, why does that needle twitch and point north? Now, you and I remember getting compass when we were kids, and like, oh, cool, and then we forget it, we're like, oh, look, a dead squirrel, and we're on to something else. Einstein just couldn't figure out, how does a force field make a physical object move? And so he sits there, throughout his life, until his deathbed. He's still writing equations, trying to figure out how force fields work. It was that type of curiosity about things you and I would consider mundane that made him a genius.
I want to ask about this last presidential election, or most recent, certainly, and the media. As a journalist and looking at the various forms of media, lots of challenges that the media is biased. Do you think the media, today's media, could change the election, did change the election or influence vote?
No, I actually think it surprised me in some ways that what we have now is we used to have one big old, thing you could call the media. When I was at Time Magazine and Cronkite was at CBS, and we'd say that's the media. Now you have hundreds of places you can go to for information. You can go to different places on the internet. If you're more conservative, you might want to get your information from Fox. If you're more liberal, you might want it from MSNBC. It's hard to say the media is one thing. This is good for America. We all have more sources of information. But in the end, I don't think any particular media outlet drove things that much. I mean, people were able to switch channels, surf around the internet, get the information they believed in. But I don't think we in the media are quite as powerful as we sometimes like to think we are.
We know that Newsweek has given up its print edition. Do you see the same for Time?
No, I think that print is a good enough technology. I still get most of my news digitally, on my iPad or on my computer at night. But there's a certain convenience to a print format as well. When I'm traveling to Jackson, Mississippi, I get to bring the magazine and put it in my back pocket or take it on the bus with me when I go across town. So I think that perhaps 25–30% of the information we receive in the future will be done on print products, and about 70–75% might be done digitally, and that's how the balance will end up.
One final question, and then we need to stop, but who do you want to talk to next? You talked about your next book, but who would you really like to sit down and have a great conversation with?
I like people who are doing innovative things in business and technology. I mean, if I could have my dream set of interviews, it would be to go everywhere from here in Jackson to Austin, Texas, to New Orleans, to Silicon Valley, and say, tell me about the new technology and the new business you're trying to start up. We're in an era in which young people are doing startups. They're becoming entrepreneurs, just like Ben Franklin was when he was a young person. Those are the people whose conversations excite me.
Walter Isaacson, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's so nice to be with you.